Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's wonderful to see you all again, and it's incredibly pleasing to be with you in this time of difficulty where we are all so separated. This gives us an opportunity to see and be near each other. This is a time of isolation. This is a time where, because of circumstances, we have all been separated from each other. Yet, there is a striving within us that wants to be together. And in this striving, technology has come up with ways that we can be somehow together. And we've accomplished this because of our effort and because of our will. But you should know, if you don't already, that there is isolation in Sufism. When I was in Ankara at the tomb of Haji Bayram Vali, I was taken below. There's a mosque and there's a tomb. I was taken below the mosque, and there's an area below the mosque where people used to go into isolation. And the isolation period in Sufism for people who've been doing it for a while is for 40 days. And essentially they go into a cave-like situation where they're given some food and some water, but they are in darkness and they are without the ability to have sound. There's no sound there. So they don't see and they don't hear. So what's the point? The point is to deaden the body to the external stimuli, to deaden the body to the normal, everyday influences that we have, to remove ourselves from the world, to remove ourselves from stimuli, to remove ourselves from sights and sounds, to remove ourselves from everything that bombards us and keeps us in imagination. When we see things, we react to them. When we hear things, we react to them. It's almost involuntary. We can't help but react because they enter into our sphere of perception. Imagine if your sphere of perception was altered so that the everyday occurrences were taken away, that everything that you see and hear and smell were taken away, that your normal interactions were taken away, that you were without those interactions. Now, things occur on many levels because of that. Not only don't you see and don't you hear and don't you smell, but your mind doesn't react to what you see or what you hear or what you smell. You have decreased the input and you've decreased your reaction. So now the mind has to find an almost different way of functioning. You no longer are input receptors that react to input. Now you're without input. You're without all of these things coming at you on a constant basis. Now, when we talk about altering our being and changing our consciousness, one of the things that we talk about consistently is that in order to become different, we have to change the nature of our interface with the world. That's a computer term. We have to change the nature of our interplay with the world. You see, we react to the world in different ways and in different manners. The world is important to us as we make it important. The world is important to us as we give it credence. The world is important to us as we allow it to be. And we allow it to be very important unconsciously. We allow what goes on in the world to be very important without thought. We accept it as important because of our involvement in it. Now, detachment is a very easy word to say, and we all know what detachment means. Detachment means not to be affected by that which we are in constant contact with, not to be affected by that which what we see, not to be affected by that which we hear, not to be affected by that which we smell. But it's easy to say, but it's not so easy to do. Imagine the smell of fresh baked bread wafting into your presence. All of a sudden, your mind imagines bread, your taste bud tastes bread. All of a sudden, you're involved with bread. Whether you want to be or not, you're involved with bread. Well, this is only one tiny example of the things that we're involved with. And we can understand from this one tiny example how this involvement overwhelms all of our being. There are so many different things that go on in the world that we're involved with. If you listen to the news, they break it up into segments, and each segment covers a different part of what's going on. The same way in a newspaper, you'll have the national news, you'll have the international news, you'll have the local news, you'll have the sports, you'll have the comics, you'll have all different sections of things that you can choose to be involved with. And depending on your nature, how involved are you? The political situation in this country and in many parts of the world right now is such that people are truly overwhelmed by politics to the point where it becomes at the forefront of their consciousness and becomes the most important thing that they're doing or thinking. Now, we know that the most important thing that we should be doing is focusing on our relationship with God. There's only so much ability for our focus, and we can't focus on too many things at once. So we have to make some choices and some decisions. If we choose to focus on the world, if we choose to be overly involved in the world, it becomes very difficult to keep our focus on God, because we have given importance to the world. So, if we consider our job very important, most of our thought process will be about our job. I remember when I was first working in my mid-20s, I used to bring my work home. I used to tell my wife what I was doing. And I used to talk about it constantly. I almost couldn't stop talking about what I was doing at work. Well, that lasted for about 2 years. And then I learned how when I left the office to leave the office. Now, that's a very important thing. When we leave the office, we have to leave the office. When we leave work, we have to leave work. Whatever it is that we're doing, when we're finished, we should be finished. And we should be able to pick up something new. And what is that something new that we need to pick up? Well, it depends, of course, on each of us and on what we're involved with and what the things that we do are. But what should be going on is when we have time, when we have the ability, we should constantly be refocusing ourselves on our relationship to Allah. We should constantly be refocusing ourselves on what is reality. We should constantly be asking these questions. Now, in the way that we were taught by our teacher, Muhammad Rahim Bawa Muhaiyaddeen, he indicated that there should be a constant repetition of La ilaha illallah within us, whether we are working or whatever we are doing. And people would ask him, how do you accomplish this? How can you do it all the time, even though you're doing other things? And his answer was that it's like water from a well. You push the handle, and then after a while, the water begins to flow. And it's like that with the recitation of La ilaha illallah. If you do it constantly, after a while, it becomes part of you and goes on automatically. We need to be able to accomplish this. We need to be able to have a constant remembrance of reality. And this is what sets our consciousness. If our consciousness is not in Hak, in reality, Hak it means reality, it's one of God's names. If our consciousness is not in God's reality, then our consciousness is in illusion and in the world. And consciousness is a sliding scale, and we have to constantly be aware of this. If we're involved with feeling sorry for ourselves, if we're involved with being angry, if we're involved with jealousy, if we're involved with any of the qualities that are between me and somebody else, and if you look at these qualities, jealousy has to do with what other people have. Anger has to do with how you feel about other people. Hatred has to do with how you feel about other people. It's all about me and you, me and you, me and you. Somehow, you need to escape from me and you. You need to go to another level of understanding, not me and you, but me and me disappearing into God. So that as opposed to other people constantly doing things to us, and we have to react to them, we begin to understand that we are not the doer. Allah is the doer, and Allah does through us. Now, if Allah is the doer, and if all actions are coming from Allah and through us, then what is the state of our being? Arrogance comes from believing that you are the doer. Arrogance comes from believing that you can alter circumstances. Arrogance comes from taking over Allah's position as the doer. Humility comes from understanding Allah's position as the doer. And if we can understand that Allah is in each of our hearts, and Allah does through each of us, and Allah is the ultimate doer of all things, we become different. We can't be as involved in praise or blame if we understand that Allah is the doer. Anything that happens that's positive is because Allah allowed it to happen. Allah brought it about. So how can we take credit for anything that happens? It's Allah who allowed it to happen. And once we can relieve ourselves of the burden of the responsibility for the outcome of things, our life becomes easier because we no longer have to take blame for things that don't go the way our mind thinks that they should. Now understand that sentence, the way our mind thinks that they should. Our mind has a very narrow perspective. It's very egocentric, and it has a certain perspective. This perspective is not necessarily valid. It can be valid, but very often it's not valid. And we emotionally react to this invalid perspective as if there was reality to it. As time passes, we lose attachment to that perspective and we get over things. But during the time that they're going on and the attachment is strong, it can cause us terrible distress. We need to get away from that. We need to get away from that distress. We need to understand that what Allah brings, we need to accept. And then with courage, move on to the next phase of what it is we have to do. And what it is we have to do is become closer to Allah. Somehow, we have to continue our path towards our Lord. And it's hard for people to understand, but it starts over every day. It's not something that is automatic. Effort is a very important word, and effort is at the core of our relationship with God. We have to make effort to create, to maintain, and to sustain that relationship. Allah doesn't have to do all those things. We're weak. He's strong. He is all powerful. All things come to him without effort. All things come to us with effort and with his guidance, with his mercy, and with his compassion. We should understand that if we reach any level of understanding, it's because he allowed it. But we should also understand that to get to these levels of understanding, we have to put forth effort because Allah has deemed it that way. Allah has made the world a world where effort is involved, and without effort, things don't get done. Why do we go to work every day? Why do we have the word work? Work is effort, and effort accomplishes things. Now, in truth, Allah accomplishes everything, but we become the hands that do it within this realm. We become the eyes that see it within this realm. And the Sufis determined that sometime in our lives, as we move on this path, we should take a break from sensory input. And that's why they go into seclusion. And they usually only do this once, but it goes on for 40 days. And it gives them a real idea of what it's like to be beyond the senses. Now imagine, what does that actually entail? Being beyond the senses is a premonition or a prequel to death. So as you go to a space where the sensory input is entirely cut off from you, you become different. And if you can maintain that idea of sensory deprivation and bring yourself in your meditation back to that place of sensory deprivation, the veils that separate you from reality begin to disappear. The veils are sensory perception. The veils that separate you from reality are sensory perception. The veils that separate you from reality are attachment to the senses, an attachment to what you think are going to be the result of your involvement with illusion. People truly believe that illusion will somehow solve their problems. People truly believe that illusion will somehow give them great satisfaction in the world. People believe that what the world is made up of can somehow satisfy the deep needs they have within them. It can't. What it can do is it can show you that what it can do for you is limited and that you have to turn somewhere else. And that's why we're all here. We've already gotten to the point where we understood that the world by itself cannot fill our needs. It cannot fill our deepest desires. It cannot fill our deepest wants. What can do that? Entering into a life that looks for answers in a different place. If we are without the attachment to form, if we are without sensory perception, we become closer to that which is formless, because we don't have the veils, the elemental veils, separating us from the formless. And what is it that's formless? Allah is formless, and all of his gracious qualities, which are he, are also formless. Now, it's when we speak about Allah, we say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So we say, in the name of God, the merciful and the compassionate. So God's name is not just Allah. God's name is also mercy and compassion. God is also mercy and compassion. It's very difficult to be in the midst of desire and needing things for yourself in this elemental world to be simultaneously merciful and compassionate. You're too busy gathering. You're too busy bringing in for yourself. When you can take a respite from your needs, you can be compassionate. When you no longer have this absolute need to satisfy yourself, you can be compassionate. When you lose your egocentric need to control everything around you, you can do things on behalf of others, not in the way you want them to be, but in the way that you respond to what they need. So we need to learn how to be empathetic. When we feel, we have to be able to feel beyond our own being. We have to be able to feel others. We have to be able to feel their needs, and then we can respond to their needs. For those of us who lived with Muhammad Rahim Bawa Muhaiyaddeen for an extended period of time, one of the things that we noticed, and it was consistent, that whoever came before him took all of his attention, and he was focused on that person. Sometimes he even took up their mannerisms, but he was focused on what they needed in order to move on to wherever the next step was for them. And he was able to know that because he was able to know them and to know their innermost self. So for us to be truly able to help somebody else, it doesn't happen because of our mind's ideas. It happens because of our empathy towards other people and our ability to actually feel what it is they want and what it is they need and what it is that can be given to them that will help them alter their state so that they can somehow fulfill their deepest inner needs. Now, Allah is doing this all the time. So if we can attach ourselves to Allah, what we need will be granted to us. But it takes giving up, and this is a very important word, self-motive, might be two words, but we have to learn how to release self-motive. We have to learn how to stop constantly thinking about ourselves. We have to learn how to stop constantly being involved with our dilemmas. We have to learn how to stop constantly being involved with our problems. You know, if you have a problem, you can sit and mull over it for days and days and days. In business, I had a partner in a building business, and his entire day and all of his waking hours were preoccupied with how he was going to do the business, what he was going to do next, how he was going to resolve this. He was constantly working out worldly dilemmas. There was no time for him as to any other dilemmas. So his world had four corners to it. And these corners were worldly corners. His entire world was made up of the elemental. There was nothing else for him. I have lots of stories of people who were like that and what their lives became. And essentially, as they got older and older and older, they were taken away from their work. They were taken away from that which preoccupied them constantly. And all of a sudden, when they stopped doing that, they were hopeless. They had nowhere to turn to. They had nothing to do. They didn't know where they could go. So retirement kills people because their entire world was their work. We should be living a balanced life. We have to work, but we have to have time for Allah. And we have to have time for the truth. And we have to have time to contemplate reality. So we need to lead what the monks call a contemplative life. We need to lead a life that considers the entire avenue of our existence, from birth through adolescence, through young adulthood, to middle age, through becoming older, through the possibility of death. We have to consider all of it. And then we also have to consider what happens after death. There is an entire gamut that we have to consider, and we can't stop at any one phase. And we have to understand that this period of our existence is part of a much larger continuum and continues after this phase is over. And that what we do in this phase has an effect on the continuum, has an effect on what happens next, has an effect on what we are becoming. And we need to take into consideration that we are constantly becoming. We're not stopping, we're becoming. Either we're going backwards or we're going forwards. And since consciousness is a sliding scale, you should understand that you're always capable of sliding back down. You should understand you're always capable of being a lot less than you were yesterday. Now, the point is not to be less than you were yesterday. The point is to become more than you were yesterday. And the way that you do that is to concentrate on reality and separate yourself from this world and the illusory nature of this world. So we need very seriously to contemplate what we can't see. We have to be able to concentrate on mercy. We have to be able to concentrate on compassion. We have to be able to concentrate on justice. We have to be able to concentrate on love. We have to be able to concentrate on kindness. And we have to see them as real as the things that we touch and feel. In truth, they are more real. Their lifespan is, their existence is eternal. Love is eternal. Mercy is eternal. All of the things we deal with on a daily basis are temporary in nature and will pass. So we need to be able to be attached to that which is eternal. And we have to give our attention to that which is eternal. And that way we integrate ourselves with that which is eternal. And then we change as beings. We become more. More in the sense that we become akin to reality. We become closer to reality. Less means we become more illusory. We become more involved in what's illusory. We become more attached to illusion. So we have to change our attachment. We have to ride La ilaha illallah. We have to take the reins of La ilaha illallah and let that pull us forward, not the ideas of the world. One time when I was sitting in front of Bawa, he was talking about movies. And he said, when you go to the movies and the lights go on, make sure the show isn't over. Because for most people, our life is that entertainment that's in front of it. Our life is what we see. But we have to make sure that as that disappears, that's not the end. It's the chance for the beginning. So when we pull out of the movie, we can pull into reality. When we pull out of the play, we can move into reality. When we move out of the act, we can move in to reality. Allah, we ask you from the depths of our being to let us understand the truth. Allah, we ask you from the depths of our being to bring us closer to you, to bring us to the point where mercy and compassion become natural to us, where justice and kindness become natural to us, where love becomes who we are. We ask you to bring us closer to you, to open up our hearts so that we can know and understand you. We know that our mind is not what's going to know you. It is our heart that's going to know you. So break the rock of our heart. Break all the animosities in our existence. Break all the difficulties in our existence and bring us closer to you. Open up our heart so that your light emanates from us and in us, so that we see reality, so that we're in touch with reality, so that we know reality, so that we know you. Allah, we know this world was created because of the relationship that you have with man. And if man loses his relationship with you, there is no reason for the existence of this world. So we ask that we don't turn to others to have them be the ones who are involved with you. We turn to ourselves and say, we must be involved with you. Each of us must be involved with you for the purpose of holding back destruction and saving this world for humanity. Ask not who else is going to do it. Do it yourselves. We have to do it ourselves. We have to become the ones who have a relationship with God. We have to become the ones who have a relationship with our Creator. We have to become the ones who talk directly to Him on behalf of all of humanity. So we have to ask on behalf of all of humanity that cures come for these viruses that exist in the world, that cures come for the animosities that exist in the world, that cures come for the hatreds and the petty jealousies that exist in the world, that cures come and that people understand that there is no other answer but love, and that they must learn to love, and in love they will save themselves and save the world. Our salvation is in love. May it be that each of us is able to bring ourselves to the state of pure, true, unselfish, unconditional love for all of humanity. May it be so, our Lord. Ameen. Ameen. Ya Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.